I'm certain he isn't your son, she whispered persistently to Samuel. Look, he doesn't resemble you or her. He's so pale, and his eyes are nothing like yours. You were born with dark eyes, and your skin was tanned, but this baby is very fair. Embark on this exciting story now. If you're already familiar with our channel and want to help us continue moving you with more videos, please support us by pressing the like button. Let's go to the video. Emily and Samuel had been married for a year and a half, and both of them longed to have a child. It's no wonder they were overjoyed when Emily found out she was pregnant. With each passing month without conceiving, their expectations grew, feeding their hope of starting a family. On a certain day, Emily felt strange and decided to take a pregnancy test. As she waited for the result, her heart pounded with anticipation for good news. Finally, the long-awaited positive line appeared on the test, and she couldn't contain her happiness. Samuel, come here quickly. I have something amazing to tell you. Emily exclaimed, filled with joy. Samuel, who was in the backyard, heard Emily's call and ran towards her, worried and curious about her excitement. Emily, what happened? Why are you so euphoric? He asked, scared and curious. Samuel, my love, I'm pregnant. Look at the positive test, she said, pointing at the test with a serious expression. This is incredible. Samuel replied, wide-eyed, as he hugged his wife. I knew our dream would come true one day, he added, even more excited than Emily. Yes, my love, I couldn't be happier, Emily replied, wiping the tears from her face. Despite occasional arguments since the early months of their marriage, this news brought them closer and made them feel good about each other for a while. They met at the cafe where Samuel worked as a waiter, and they instantly felt a connection. Later, when they started dating, they learned how to navigate difficult situations together, which was a great start to their relationship. When they first met, Samuel was serving coffee to a customer, and Emily noticed his gaze fixed on her, which made her feel a bit embarrassed. Samuel, being the brave person he is, didn't bring up the subject until Emily took the initiative and asked for his phone number. In the evening, Emily anxiously waited for his call, and that's when Samuel called. They had a better conversation, and the following weekend, they went out on a date. 2 months passed, and Samuel asked Emily to marry him. They started living together. Samuel's mother, Mrs. Maria, wasn't very pleased with their sudden marriage. She thought her son was still too young, and Emily, being slightly older, didn't please her either. Despite Mrs. Maria's concerns, Samuel was happy with his decision, and since Emily got pregnant, he was determined to take care of her like a princess. When Samuel was young, he had mumps, which caused concerns about his fertility, as his mother repeatedly warned. However, all their worries were in vain, and the couple anxiously awaited the arrival of their first child. But when the time came to choose a name for their future child, they couldn't agree. They had different ideas for a male name, and Emily wasn't satisfied with the names Samuel suggested, suspecting they came from his mother. As time went on, Emily and Samuel began to argue and disagree with each other more frequently. One day, Samuel mentioned that he would temporarily stay at his parents' house, even though they hadn't officially separated through divorce. Emily remained in the rented house they lived in, and Samuel continued to pay the rent, although it became increasingly challenging for him since it wasn't cheap. After the baby was born, the young couple remained separated, but Samuel had to move back in when the little one arrived, which didn't please his mother. The baby's arrival also prompted the couple to start communicating with each other again, and over time, they slowly grew closer. They fell in love once more. However, Emily didn't want to move to her mother-in-law's house, creating a bit of a dilemma. But Emily began, thanks, maybe I can take care of the baby alone. I think I can manage. Emily, please, implored Samuel. You have no idea how difficult it is to deal with newborns. My mother told me, and your parents live far away. Plus, you know I have to work. I don't have much time. And to make matters worse, the rent for that house keeps increasing. It's hard for me to support a baby and maintain that house. If that's the problem, I can look for a cheaper place for us to live, like an apartment, suggested Emily. You just solved one of the problems, Emily. Come on, it's not going to be this bad, insisted Samuel. Emily snorted and replied, even if your mother decides to help me, I won't be able to handle it. You know my temper. Your mother doesn't seem very happy when I go to visit her. Imagine living under the same roof as she is with a newborn, she said. Oh, stop making things up, Emily. Mom is a little complicated, but she has a good heart. She's just a little grumpy. But it's a trait of our family. I'll probably be like that too, and you'll stop loving me, Samuel snapped. Emily fell silent in response and reluctantly agreed with her partner. Samuel was a man from a good family, although he wasn't in the best financial condition. He had graduated and hoped to improve his financial situation as soon as possible. He wanted to live happily with his wife and son. The remaining months, even the birth, passed quickly. Soon, the father was holding the baby. Samuel named him Gustavo, as Emily had always wanted. After the birth, Emily felt very weak and didn't care much about using the baby's name or the idea of moving to Maria's house. But living there wasn't pleasant. It didn't feel right for her to reside there. Maria was always dissatisfied with everything, and the baby didn't arouse as much affection from her as expected from a grandmother. Instead, she merely tolerated him. The reason was that, when looking at the newborn, Maria convinced herself that the baby didn't resemble her son, and nothing convinced her that he was too young to resemble anyone else. I'm sure he's not your son, she whispered constantly to Samuel. Look, he doesn't even look like you or her. He's so fair, and his eyes are nothing like yours. You were born with dark eyes and tan skin, but this baby is very fair. Mother, babies usually look more like their grandparents and great-grandparents, Samuel replied. Emily's cousin is blonde, he added. She must be dyeing her hair, his mother retorted. Mother, stop it already, said Samuel, growing irritated. Gustavo is my son. I love him, and you must love him too. Time passed, and Samuel, his wife, and son still needed to live in Maria's house. Emily begged Samuel to move and live away from his mother. But he just shrugged his shoulders. He had a new job with a good position and had to travel frequently for work, leaving his wife and children in the care of his mother. As he became more distant, Emily began to suspect that something was wrong. Samuel's mood swings and indifference became more frequent. At the same time, his gestures of exaggerated attention were followed by gifts that no longer alleviated her growing fear that Samuel was cheating on her. One night, while organizing the clothes in Samuel's suitcase, Emily noticed a lipstick mark on the collar of his shirt. It came as a shock to her, confirming her worst suspicions. With trembling hands, she decided to check her husband's phone. To her surprise, he had blocked it, which was unusual behavior. What is he hiding? Emily wondered. She wanted to find out if she was becoming paranoid or if there really was something wrong. Regardless, she wanted to confirm whether her husband was indeed cheating. Perhaps it was because she had stayed home with the baby for so long and gained weight, losing her confidence. Maybe she was no longer attractive to him. Like many women, Emily blamed herself, searching for the cause within herself. However, she couldn't sleep peacefully until she finally confirmed or denied her suspicions. Samuel remained affectionate but somewhat distant. He rarely left his phone unattended, and if it rang, he would immediately leave the room. Then, one day, coincidentally, Samuel had just finished a call when his mother called him, and he left, forgetting his cell phone on the bedside table next to the bed. Emily picked it up like someone starving, grabbing a piece of meat. She was eager to know the truth, whatever it was. She started checking his cell phone, but there was nothing suspicious in the 3 messages, except that a name, Lisa, appeared too often. Curiosity got the better of Emily, and she decided to take a risk. She pressed the call button, but instead of a female voice, she heard a man's voice. "Yes, Samuel, you forgot to tell me something," asked the man on the other end of the line. "Hello." Emily silently pressed the end button on her phone and carefully placed it back down. She felt completely confused. What is going on, she wondered. Who was that guy? She was confused. Is it someone from the company? From Samuel? The first thing that came to Emily's mind was that Samuel and the man on the phone were seeing other women. Are those scoundrels cheating on their wives? Am I being cheated on? The questions in Emily's head wouldn't cease. Samuel didn't notice the change in his wife when he returned. He was sharing some future plans with her, but she couldn't understand their meaning. She just couldn't hear anything. Her husband suddenly seemed completely strange to her. It was as if Samuel was hiding something from her, even though she didn't know what it was. I want to visit Roberta tomorrow. Gustavo and I are going to stay with her for a few days, said Emily out of the blue, leaving Samuel confused. Emily's friend Roberta lived on the other side of town and had invited her to visit. It seemed convenient to leave now and not have to look her husband in the eye. The feeling that something wasn't right was consuming her. Emily needed to pause and figure out what to do next. And so, she went to her friend, who joyfully welcomed her and the baby. After hearing Emily's story, Roberta began to convince her that it was probably all in her head. She still thought it involved another woman. After all, it was strange that the contact's name was saved with a female name, but even so, a man answered when she called. As the conversation progressed and Emily opened up to her friend, Roberta started to believe that maybe Samuel was indeed cheating on her. I've heard that men love to give gifts when they are cheating, just to disguise and please, Roberta said, referring to the gifts Samuel had been giving. Emily had even seen a lipstick mark on his shirt, which made her wonder about Samuel's actions. And then, the friends concluded that he really was cheating on Emily. The woman's intuition seemed to confirm their suspicions. Emily was in tears, devastated by her conclusion. After spending some time trying to comfort her, Roberta suggested something that wouldn't solve the problem but could alleviate some of the bitterness that Emily was feeling. According to Roberta, she said that Emily just needed to distract herself and focus on herself, forgetting about Samuel and not solely focusing on her son. Roberta decided to help her friend regain a little bit of her social essence. Emily needed to be surrounded by people again, showing everyone that she was still amazing and charismatic. A party at a friend's house seemed to be the best option for a successful return to social life. After hiring a nanny for Gustavo, the women went out to the party and started drinking wine. It didn't take long for Emily to let go of her age. Soon, she and her friends began to impress the men who were around. Roberta's friend, the host of the party, introduced Emily to his friend, Ko. He seemed mature and serious, yet at the same time, he proved to be an interesting person. It was a new experience for Emily, who was still feeling guilty. But when she remembered the lipstick mark she had found on her husband's shirt, the weight on her conscience eased. Additionally, she thought it was important to understand if she still attracted men or if something was going on with her appearance. Ko spent the entire night captivating Emily. Her anger towards her husband and the amount of drinks she consumed played their part. Emily, quite drunk, couldn't see anything else. The next morning, she woke up startled in the arms of a near stranger. As she gathered her things in panic, she realized that something terrible had happened. In addition to her husband's alleged betrayal, Ko called a taxi for her and bought her coffee. Roberta consoled her friend's fears. She was happy because Emily had fun and seemed to have given her husband payback for his betrayal. Roberta even offered to take care of Gustavo at her house and give Emily some time off. She assured her that she had suffered enough with this family, emphasizing that these things happen to everyone, and it's not a problem to have some fun since Samuel was doing the same thing to her. Roberta tried to convince Emily to stay, but she remained thoughtful. She picked up Gustavo and decided to go back home to her husband. Upon arriving home, she was greeted by a dissatisfied mother-in-law who immediately began scolding her for missing an appointment related to the baby. They were supposed to take Gustavo to daycare and were gathering the necessary documents. Emily couldn't bear to hear her mother-in-law's screams anymore. She intended to find a job and made up her mind to leave her mother-in-law's house, with or without her husband. "Where were you?" her mother-in-law exclaimed. "He's here because he's carrying his son around," Madame Maria continued, starting to scold her. "I was with Roberta. She needed my support," Emily lied with a shaky voice. "I don't need support here. I need help. I can't ask for help for my son. He's always out, and your case isn't much different either. It's better if you help me with the housework than comfort anyone you see," her mother-in-law continued. Emily didn't argue. She felt ashamed of her mistake, so she kept quiet. Although Roberta had said she should continue acting that way, Emily hoped that her random affair would stay in the past and eventually stop gnawing at her conscience with guilt. But things turned out differently. Ko managed to get Emily's phone number with Roberta's help, and Emily didn't understand why she agreed to meet him. After he called, she found out that he was well known in town, a famous artist in the area and a creative person. Emily found him incredibly interesting. However, he had experienced a tragedy shortly before his wedding. He and his fiancée had a car accident, and his fiancée died on the way to the hospital. The doctors fought for Ko's life for a long time, and he survived. He spent months in a hospital bed, where he started to draw and discovered his talent for art. But Ko ended up accepting. However, that same day, when he got home, Maria called him to talk about something serious. It was then that Emily's mother-in-law revealed that a woman had contacted her and told her the whole truth. The woman said she was having an affair with Samuel and decided to reveal it because Samuel had been stalling for some time, repeatedly saying that he would break up with Emily but never following through. However, this was not a surprise to Emily. Although she felt bad, she was also relieved. Emily started to confront Samuel, but Maria, even though she knew her son was in the wrong, started defending him, creating a mess in the middle of the argument. Emily ended up revealing that she had retaliated against her husband, which made Maria even more nervous. "So, you pretend you didn't know that your son and I had been estranged for a while? We just live under the same roof," Emily responded to her mother-in-law's insults. "His immoral wife? It doesn't surprise me. From the start, I suspected that his son was born out of wedlock. That boy is not my Samuel's son. It was you who betrayed him first," said Maria. "I will not receive anything from us, neither you nor your son, and leave my house," Maria shouted. Emily raised her head and replied, "I have wanted to do this for a long time, and I will gladly do it. But make no mistake, Samuel is not going to abandon his son that easily. He is the father, and it can easily be proven with a DNA test. You are completely crazy to spend money on tests. Get out of our lives and leave my son in peace, Emily declared. So, Emily left the house, and things were clarified for both sides. Samuel and Emily did not have any personal contact. However, Samuel agreed to do a DNA test to resolve the paternity issue. As he also believed that the child was not his, curiously, even though Samuel had betrayed her first, he seemed to be upset with her. Apparently, for some reason, he believed his mother's version, which said that his daughter-in-law had gotten pregnant by someone else, even though she was engaged to Samuel. He claimed that this was the reason for his betrayal as well. Emily questioned why he would base his betrayal on mere guesswork. But Samuel denied it and said that he had already secretly done a DNA test, and the result was incompatible. Emily felt butterflies in her stomach but insisted that he was bluffing. This led to their agreement to do the DNA test. However, Emily was surprised to learn that she and Samuel had already divorced because they didn't believe each other's versions. Nevertheless, Maria made a point of being present at Emily's side when it was time to collect the test results. Emily was left speechless when her mother-in-law showed her the document, clearly indicating that the degree of kinship between Gustavo and Samuel was 0%. Maria questioned Emily, waiting for answers, but she could only stutter a few things and ran off, confused, distancing herself from Maria. This copy can only be wrong. Samuel is the father of my child, she cried on the phone while talking to Ko. Ko suggested doing another test, but Emily replied that they wouldn't agree, and she needed Samuel's consent. If you are sure he is the father, there is only one option. We need to investigate this to see if the hospital made a mistake, Ko suggested. At first, he didn't want to even think about it. But Ko managed to convince her, and in the end, it was the right thing to do. With time, Emily herself began to suspect the situation. This is not my baby, so where is the child I gave birth to, she wondered. So, they both began to investigate what had happened. They went to the hospital where Gustavo was born and found that there were 3 other mothers there on the same day. 2 had girls, and only one, like Emily, had a boy. This prompted them to search for this woman who also had a boy. They dedicated all their efforts to finding her, but it wasn't easy since the address on the documents was no longer her residence. They didn't know where she had gone. The neighbors informed them that the family was very poor and that no one took care of the children. She is an alcoholic, said a former neighbor, and her husband was also an alcoholic. It seems they went somewhere to earn money, and the youngest son was with them, while the eldest was taken away by Child Protection Services. Months passed, and they were still searching for that family. Both Gustavo and the son of the woman who was present at the hospital were already older and walking. Ko took Emily and Gustavo to live with him and was confident in the success of the case. Even when Emily was completely desperate, they continued their search. They also looked for Gustavo's biological parents, whose information Ko managed to obtain through a friend who worked in the authorities. It was soon discovered that the family had moved to the husband's sister's house, where they drank together and often got into trouble with the police. The baby's mother had recently died, and the father was caught stealing again. In fact, they confirmed that somehow the babies had been switched, and that was what caused all this commotion. Emily's own child was left as an orphan and was probably living with his aunt. This idea scared Emily, and she didn't want to wait another minute, afraid that something terrible would happen to her biological son at any moment or that he would be taken by strangers. For Samuel and Maria, the flame of love for the couple had already gone out. He thought about suing the hospital but gave up on the idea. It was no longer any use, so he dropped it. They went to the address indicated on the same day, the supposed place where Emily's biological son was. They arrived at a very old house in a very dirty place. Emily knocked on the door a few times, but got no answers. The door was not locked, so she decided to find her son anyway. She went in but immediately backed away, impacted by the smell that hit her nose. The place was filled with dirty bodies, alcohol, and garbage. In the middle of this nightmare, there was no sign of Bruno, her real son. Being careful not to scare the boy, she called him by the name Bruno for the first time and asked what he was doing there and who gave him permission to enter her house. An intoxicated woman showed up at the door, with a dirty jacket and unkempt hair. She questioned why Emily was calling him Bruno, not understanding who Emily was referring to. Emily explained that she needed to talk to a boy named Bruno, clarifying that he was her nephew. The woman, not showing much concern, asked if Emily had seen the boy and kicked a drunk man who was lying on the floor. The man, indifferent, replied that Bruno was probably wandering around and mentioned teaching him a lesson when he gets back so he wouldn't wander around again. He then laid back on the floor and fell asleep, mentioning Bruno's fondness for playing with other kids. The woman abruptly slammed the front door, leaving Samuel in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and seeing, realizing how fate could have placed his baby in such a terrible situation. But Ko, more confident than ever, got Emily, who was completely exhausted, back into the car, and they drove around in a hurry, searching for the boy. They decided to ask the homeless people if they had seen Bruno, as they were known to be familiar with him. Most of the residents from the street walked away when he started asking questions about the boy. However, a gentleman agreed to show them where to find him. He explained that Bruno usually hid there when his aunt mistreated him. The man described Bruno as the most traumatized 3-year-old boy he had ever seen and mentioned helping him whenever he could. Emily's eyes filled with tears after hearing this. They resumed their search and eventually found the boy sleeping among boxes, rubbing his eyes with dirty hands. Confused by the situation, he wondered why this pretty woman called him Bruno and claimed to be his mother when his real mother was gone, and his father had been arrested again. He had been hiding from his aunt. In response, Emily assured him with tears in her eyes that his mother was alive, and she was his real mother. Overwhelmed, the boy looked at Emily's gentle, tearful face, wishing deep within his soul that her words were true. After enduring so much suffering in his life, he desperately wanted to believe that his mother would not abandon him and that he would finally be loved and cared for. Emily hugged the boy's fragile body and held him close. Their hearts were beating loudly, and they both felt that nothing could separate them anymore. She took the boy with her, and they fell when they obtained legal recognition of their relationship through the court. The truth was revealed to Samuel and Maria, but only Samuel apologized to Emily, and she did the same. Furthermore, Samuel started visiting and taking care of his biological son frequently, becoming a very present father in his life. Bruno never saw his aunt angry again. He also met Gustavo, and Emily was happy to see their two boys, the most loved and dear beings in the world, quickly becoming friends. They felt true motherly love and care from Emily, and Samuel was always there, not only as Emily's husband but also as the second father to the boys. To resolve the situation between Samuel and Emily and prevent further confusion, clear communication and trust building are essential. They need open and honest discussions about their emotions, needs, and expectations. Seeking therapy or counseling as a family could also provide a safe space for healing, understanding, and resolving conflicts. As for the main culprit for all that happened, it was a combination of various factors rather than a single individual's fault. The hospital's negligence might have contributed to the initial confusion, but blaming a specific person may not be productive. It is more important to focus on healing, forgiveness, and creating a loving and supportive environment for the family. If you liked this emotional story, please show your support by liking this video, and this other video that is appearing on your screen now is also very moving. It will certainly touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.